A lot of what we do as procurement professionals takes creativity. It takes strategic thought. It takes learning the business, their needs, your suppliers, how they operate. It's more of, in my opinion, an art sometimes than a science.
Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Smarter Sourcing. My name is John Pavia, and today we are honored to be joined by Ulunda Baker, Senior Director of Diversity, Sourcing, and Purchasing. Ulunda, thank you very much for agreeing to spend some time with us today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Really excited for this opportunity and to have some conversation today.
You've had an incredible career. You've been at this a long time. And so instead of me trying to go through it, I'd love for you to give our listeners and our viewers a sense of your path to where you are today.
Absolutely. When I talk about my story holistically between life and work, I live a full integrated life. I like to go back to the beginning because it's really interesting. At 16 years old, I walked into high school prepared to drop out. I had a tough childhood, battling poverty and episodic homelessness and a lot of other things that had impacted my family. I was the oldest of 7 and life, it just became too much.
Where'd you grow up? Where were you?
St. Petersburg, Florida.
Okay.
Was where, I was at the time. We had moved around quite a bit, but this is where we had landed at this moment. And I just made a decision. I said, the life that I was born into is not the life that I want to live. And I got to do something different. And that meant something had to shift to the side. I wanted to get a job and just have a roof over my head and, things like that. So I went into school with the intent of dropping out one day. And the class that I ended up going into that day was my Future Business Leaders of America class. And, I walked in very nonchalantly. I told the teacher, I said, I'm only going to be here through the end of the week because I'm going to drop out. I'm 16 now. I can do that. And she was aware of my home life and things that were happening. I think she read between the lines of missing days of school. And she said to me, I think you want to try this internship. It pays good money. It's after school. It's at a local insurance company. And I think you'd be a great fit for it. So why don't you try that first? But it comes with a condition. You have to stay in school. So it was like this instant job. So I show up at the insurance company. I take the deal. I show up to the insurance company. It's owned by two, I think they're brothers. And I ended up being the front desk girl. And when I quickly checked off all those things off the list, they assigned me to organizing contracts. So that was actually the first time at 16 years old that I actually put my hand on a contract in the procurement process. So I went through, organized all the contracts, put all the COIs with all the contracts. I started managing all the purchase orders for the office.
How big was this office?
It was very small. It was a very small mom and pop owned type insurance company, probably 5 people, the owners and 3 of us, assisting and a couple of agents. So I had the opportunity to learn from the ground up contract law, all about insurance, what purchasing, supplies for the office, coffee cups and tracking orders down. And then fast forward, I graduated high school, age of 19, started at City of St. Petersburg, purchasing materials management for the government, for city government. Went on to work for a company called Ceridian Benefit Services down in St. Petersburg. They had an office. I transitioned into facilities management, sourcing.
How old are you at this point?
Oh my gosh, I'm in my early 20s, mid 20s. And then I took a opportunity after that with Progress Energy, which is now known as Duke Energy because the two companies merged. And I got a lot of experience sourcing many, many categories, purchasing, learning how to train people on purchasing systems. By this time, I started having an assistant buyer on my team. So I stepped into the leadership and management very early. And then by 30, I was relocated with Duke Energy to Charlotte, North Carolina. Went on to work for a company called Jones Lang LaSalle, where I had a great growth from being a sourcing manager to becoming a director, onto a regional director, managing sourcing teams across multiple 20 plus corporate clients, all over the world, some global. So I've had a really exciting career. I call it a grassroots. Those seeds were planted at 16 years old in that little insurance company. And it was kind of like looking in a crystal ball. If someone had to look in it, Yolanda's going to end up being a leader in the procurement industry. We foretold it at the insurance company. But I've had an exciting career in working with business diversity, supplier diversity, purchasing. So that's your purchase orders, right? The folks that are getting the requisitions, sending out the purchase orders every day. And then your sourcing and category management folks who are really doing the contracting, the RFPs, the RFIs, the bids, and also, right, managing those supplier relationships, building those category sourcing plans, making sure that we're driving value to whatever company's bottom line, saving money, making sure that our third-party partnerships are healthy and strong, and all
So
that.
let me ask you this. Sometimes I'm glad we don't have lengthy conversations with any of my guests beforehand, just brief ones, because now it's going to take this discussion a whole different direction, I think. Because most people I talk to in this field, a lot of them at least, they didn't go to college or at least graduate college saying, I want to go into sourcing and procurement. And a lot of them, I'm sure that you've met so many and hired so many. There was a gap there. You didn't go straight from high school into college, right? There was a big gap.
I went from high school straight into the workforce, and I'm still finishing college. A lot of people ask me, where'd you get your MBA? Like, you've worked on mergers, acquisitions, client accounts, you've led teams of 20 plus people, all this. Where'd you get your MBA? And I said, I'm still working on my bachelor's degree, right? And it's a true testament of how our industry, has a unique position in an organization to where, I don't think you can always go to college and be taught what we do right every day, because it's not black and white. It's in the gray. A lot of what we do as procurement professionals takes creativity. It takes strategic thought. It takes learning the business, their needs, your suppliers, how they operate. It's more of, in my opinion, an art sometimes than a science. The science, the straightforward, is the data and the numbers. But how we actually do it is more of an art, and it changes every day. And I had I would say now, the honor. At the time when I entered into this industry, it was out of desperation. I needed a job, right? To have a roof over my head, to have health insurance. And it just so happened I knew how to look at contracts, right? So I get this job at the city of St. Petersburg, and I've learned everything from the ground up. I've built playbooks and training manuals based off of my own grassroots, on the battleground type experiences and knowledge. So, and I also could not afford to go to college. I could have went to college, but early on in my career, after I took the job at City of St. Petersburg, I got a phone call from a social worker that said, I have your siblings who have no place to go other than for, foster care. Would you be willing to take them in? And I made a decision at that moment in my life to say, college has to be put on hold. I'm going to take my siblings in, and I'm going to work. And I'm going to take care of me. I'm going to try to take care of them as much as I can. So that's my journey to where I am today.
So let me ask you this question. So when you go for that first job, when does the light bulb go on for you? Where all of a sudden you say, wow, this is... it had to be a moment, or maybe it wasn't, but I'm thinking there might have been like an epiphany where you went to high school planning on quitting, and you go into this, what was supposed to be an internship, I guess, or a short-term thing.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you said did something just happen? You were like, wow, the light's been turned on for me, and I'm looking at life but totally different.
When I went to, it wasn't so much at the insurance company. It was when I interviewed for the city role.
Yeah, but you're 16 though, and you go to this first one.
Yeah.
And you had to impress them. Like, and I'm just thinking about this kid who's thinking about quitting high school.
Yeah.
You go to this internship and you impress the hell out of them. So something must have happened where you had probably a very bad attitude going into high school, and then you get this internship, and nothing happened during that time. Yeah, something.
As I think about the internship, there's another moment at the city that was pretty interesting. When I think about the internship, this is probably going to be funny, but I remember before I really started, had the experience, the first maybe week or two, right? I get to the insurance company, I walk in the afternoon and they have like a little desk for me. And, I had just some little administrative things to do. And one of the administrative assistants, I remember asking me, could I take one of the partners some coffee, like make some coffee and take some coffee. So I grew up in a household where we didn't have any money. We didn't have a coffee pot. I remember my stepdad making instant coffee. So I know you'll probably laugh at this, but I'd never made a pot of coffee. I mean, we just didn't have that. 7 kids and a 2-bedroom, sometimes 1-bedroom house, 3-bedroom house, maybe. And nothing was ever constant. Barely had a microwave, right? I don't even remember having one. I didn't know how to make coffee. So I went to the coffee pot and I kind of put 2 and 2 together because I was ashamed to say that. But I put 2 and 2 together and kind of made it work. And I'd watched someone make coffee. So I kind of had an idea. And I remember, delivering the coffee cup, the coffee to one of the partners. And he was like, "It's the best coffee for have. It's kind of nice, or whatever." And I was like, I don't know what I mixed. Like, I don't remember. I was just panicked, trying to get a cup of coffee going, right? Some coffee's better than no coffee, right, John? So in that moment, I had to kind of tell the truth. I've never made a pot of coffee before. So I'll make it again if someone just teaches me how to make coffee. And I remember, him saying, "It's amazing that you gave it your best shot. Like, you were willing to figure it out and make sure that the person you were serving was delivered something better than nothing. And all the while trying to keep this persona that you had it all together. But at the end of the day, you let all that go and say, I am who I am. Teach me, and I'm willing to learn."
Fake it until you make it.
Fake it until you make it, but teach me as long as you're willing to teach me, and I'm willing to learn, because I start with nothing. So that was a pivotal moment. And those traits are still with me. When I meet with a business partner, when I meet with the supplier, when I'm entering in a new category, or my team is, and we know nothing about it, I always tell my team, just go in with a position of humility and say, I don't know, but teach me. That's why I'm coming to you, third-party supplier, because you're an expert in your industry, right? We don't have to know it all.
So tell me about your team again, and tell us a little bit about TIAA. I mean, people, TIAA to me is, I always think about TIAA and USAA, right? TIAA was originally founded, I think over 100 years ago, for college professors to have as a retirement benefits plan administrator, correct? And then it's morphed into so much more, sort of like USAA has for the military. Tell us a little bit about TIAA. I know you've been there since 2021.
Yeah, I'm still fairly new. I haven't been there I haven't been at TIAA 3 years, but I will tell you, and I'm glad I ended up there, especially coming from the background that I came from, where I started with nothing in life, let alone thinking about retirement. So we are a retirement company, right? We want to make sure that all Americans retire with equality, that there is a plan, right? And that's our job. We believe that's our calling, to help Americans have a plan, right, when they retire one day. And for me, someone that grew up in poverty, who had no plan, born into no plan, and then, I have some success in life, and then I land here 2.5 years ago at TIAA, I was just blown away, because it's so much more than retirement. It's educating people on how to save money, how to plan for your short-term, but your long-term future, right? So for me personally, it's been such a benefit working for a company that's focused on my future, because it's helped me really lock down a plan for myself, right? Planning, making sure that I have a will in place. I mean, that's a part of our, our own professional development, personal development plans. You're making sure that you're secure in all facets of your life. So essentially that's what we do, right? We want to make sure that, all Americans retire with equality, including our own employees.
And so your team, tell us how you're structured. I mean, it's a big organization. I can't remember. I read they manage in the trillions, and it's massive. And so how spread out is the organization? And then tell specifically about your team and how you manage that.
We have offices all over the country. We have some international presence as well. As far as my team is structured, we have folks on my team that focus on business diversity. So that's, supplier diversity at that next level of making sure that, we are contracting and working with all suppliers, right, in our industry, our small, minority owned, veteran owned, so just the full gamut of diversity. We also really have a focus from a business diversity perspective on supplier development, making sure that our suppliers really know how to do business with us, right, and do it well, right, and for us to understand where they are in their company journey, right, their evolution there. The other component of my team is focused on category management and sourcing. So sourcing all of your traditional corporate categories, from marketing to real estate, our legal risk and compliance and all those. So I have those traditional corporate categories. And then my team also does the purchasing. So just straightforward, at the end of the day, the supplier's got to get a purchase order, right? They get the contract, sign a contract, PO's got to come to pay against, right? So part of my team also does that. So I have a really amazing team of people that are really good at what they do. Thought leaders, strategic leaders. They take, every ounce of what we touch. We know that at the end of the day, we do it right, that down the line, it's going to have an impact on an individual who has a retirement plan with TIAA, because we're making sure that we're saving money, we're controlling costs, and making sure that we have the right relationships, managing risk. So that's kind of the overview of my team.
How big is the team? How many?
I have about 18 people now on my team, but we sit under a broader team, which also sits then under our finance. So the benefit of that is we're very closely tied as a finance organization, being, in procurement, which has been a real blessing for my team.
So is your group mostly the indirect procurement group?
Indirect, yeah,
Okay.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And are most of them there in Charlotte with you, or are they spread out?
For the most part. We've got a couple folks spread out, in 2 other locations in the country, but for the most part, majority of my team sits in the greater Charlotte area in Charlotte.
So you came to TIAA with a bunch of experience, and so I'm sure you inherited already a seasoned, mature group, but did you bring some changes with you or some ideas with you? I'm sure you did. And have you implemented some of those changes?
Yes. I think one of the key tools in my pocket, or what makes me who I am as a leader, is I'm a people leader first. So, and I know that probably sounds cliche, because as a leader, you should be focused on people, right? But let's be very honest, as a leader, you also have to focus on getting the work done and delivering results to the organization. But growing up the way that I did and taking the career path that I did the way I did, along the way, I've always been reminded that I lead like a big sister. I was the oldest of 7. I shared with you, I took siblings in. I was the mom when mom wasn't home, right? When the dads weren't there. So I was used to figuring out, if you only have $20, how do you feed 7 people? If, there's no, if the kids have to have homework the next day, if I'm 14, it doesn't matter. I still got to help my siblings get their homework the next day and get my own. So I think I naturally at work became big sister leader. That's the type of leader, I am, big sister leader. So when I came to TIAA, I looked for my opportunity to be big sister leader, right? When I tell my team all the time, it's not me leading you, it's us leading together. And in order to lead together, you've naturally got to have somebody that's a little bit older, a little bit wiser, or has a little bit more experience. But everything that I do, I try to keep my team top of mind, because I believe if you get it right with the people, the results will follow. If you support the people, the results will follow. If you take care of, the needs of the people and they're in a good place, the results will follow. So I think that's something, TI's culture is very much focused on that, very much focused on our employee resource groups, our people and our teams. And I think I fit very well in the TIA culture from that perspective to champion our people. I wear that pillar very well.
So in your current position, let's take the industry in general. Indirect procurement, sometimes, I think in years past, before the pandemic, especially when people didn't even know what supply chain even really meant, the average person, it was like the redheaded stepchild. It was like, the merchandise people, the people supposedly sourcing and procuring the important stuff to the business got the priority, and the indirect folks, they got whatever was left. But, my sense is in talking to a bunch of folks from this space, that's really changed, especially after the pandemic. And I'm curious, the seat at the table that you had when you first started out in sourcing to compare to where the seat at the table you have now, big difference?
I think it is a big difference. I've done both, direct and indirect at certain points in my career, but I definitely believe now it is more of a seat at the table. I think that folks are recognizing that because we operate in the gray quite a bit with contracting and everything's not so straightforward all the time. And as I shared earlier, it takes a lot of creativity, takes a lot of strategic thought and foresight and all of that to make the recipe work. Sometimes you don't even have all the ingredients, and sometimes we have to make the recipe work to deliver the outcomes that our business or the organization needs. I think people are appreciating that. And I think that during the pandemic, we were able to really demonstrate that. I remember my sourcing team at JLL getting pulled in to consult on how we bought PPE all of a sudden, right? Masks and gloves, and how could we leverage supplier relationships to somehow get us to be a priority when there were 50 priorities, right? But we were the ones nurturing the relationships up to that point, not just clicking, approved, right? Or sending the PO out, right? So I think through the pandemic, I know I got pulled into a lot of conversations that were just more about consulting where we were within that hour, let alone that day, right? And trying to creatively figure out a solution. And I think that's where some of the soft skills that we have as indirect procurement leaders really rises to the top, because you've got to know how to talk and shift your language, your posture, your position. You've got to know how to creatively think through solutions that don't always fit one size fit all. And the wisdom and I think discernment in the moment, the situational awareness to shift and to know when to say, this has to be a win-win to make it work. And you got to get everybody then on board with that, even though everybody has a self-serving outcome that they want, right? It really takes a special set of people to be able to do that well.
So I'd love to hear your minute or so speech that you give or lesson that you give when you have someone in front of you who's maybe new to your group and they're viewing sourcing and procurement as just buying stuff versus strategic sourcing, which was, really aligning the buying practices and the rigor around it to the company's larger goals. So when you get one of those people who, they're a good worker and all, but they're sort of not getting the importance of real strategic sourcing and procurement is, and I've always thought about it, it's really thinking about procurement from the point of view of really aligning the strategy of sourcing and procurement with the company's goals. So
That's
I'm
right.
curious, when you get one of those, folks in front of you that don't have as much experience and they're just viewing their job as just buying stuff and running some bids and whatnot, what's your, when you tell them this is what real strategic sourcing is and this is what our role is here?
I would say, when I've had to say that to a new individual to the team, or to be honest with you, seasoned folks that have forgotten, right, why we're here and why we do what we do, right? I always go to the concept of stewardship, of our responsibility to shepherd and steward the organization through their buying experience. And I always use the analogy of you're kind of a shepherd at the gate, right? You've got your, you've got your tools, you've got your experience, you've got your background, and don't forget you bring who you are. So there's going to be something specific and unique about who you are and your personality that may come into play as we shepherd and steward the organization through buying decisions. And I think that helps people make it personal. And I really try to understand, one, okay, don't tell me about what you think you're going to buy today or what we're going to buy this year, but who are you? Who are you in that buying decision? Are you a person that it's one way or the highway? Because maybe that works for certain buying decisions. We just got to have what we have to have. Maybe you're a person that you're a pretty flexible personality. You are balanced when you're in a heightened, challenging situation. we need that too, because there's going to come a time during the year where you need someone that can remain calm, that can remain very focused on the data in front of them, not have strong emotional intelligence to steward us through a deal, right? So I try to get to know, back to championing the people, get to know the people, who they are first, and then kind of move them, shift them into this place of you're kind of a steward and a shepherd through this process. Now, what shepherd you're going to be depends on who you are and the deal you're working on. And that's what makes it such a special opportunity for us in an organization, because people are really looking to us to help us do that. They may not always want us there, because then sometimes we feel like a roadblock, but that's where our communication, setting realistic timelines and expectations, educating and teaching people about our process, make no assumptions that people know exactly what we do every day, right? That's where you can bring that to the table and say, hey, I got your hand, you got my hand. We're going to go through this deal together. We're going to get you your desired outcomes while also protecting the company. And we're going to hopefully at the end of the day end up with a win-win outcome for both us and the third-party supplier. And that's how I approach it. Generally, it goes well. I mean, people have said to me over the years that I've had a unique ability to personalize our value and our why for people when they can't see it for themselves. So I'm very honored to be a part of someone's path when they're in that place, be it a new person to my team or somebody else's team, or like I said, seasoned folks tend to forget too, right? They kind of get stagnant. You can't remember why this career excited you from the get-go, right?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I want to talk about supplier diversity. You, especially your background is so unique. The perspective you must bring to this, getting that first job at 16, a woman of color down in St. Petersburg, Florida, and up through the ranks, places like JLL, and now at TIAA. So, and the priority that now all of business America now places on supplier diversity. I'm really interested to hear your viewpoint on, at the end of the day, you're still responsible for making sure whatever it is that you're sourcing and you're buying is of the quality that TIAA expects. So how do you balance those two things? And what is when you get especially when you get a new supplier that wants to become a supplier to TIAA, tell us a little bit about your perspective on that.
Yeah, my perspective, again, is back to a position of education, training, really understanding, who the supplier is. A lot of times, the business will bring a supplier to the table. We may bring a new supplier to the table. It might be cold call sometimes. Just understanding, what's the goal, right? Like, what's the outcome that we're wanting to drive here? Is it just, learning about the company? Is it really, you see a fit? You got to get suppliers to see what the fit is. A lot of times it's all great to want to do business with a company, but is there a fit, right? For your service, your good, whatever you're bringing to the table. So kind of growing up in this space, I mean, I was essentially the face of City of St. Petersburg when it came to diversity programs, when I first started at the city, and that was in 2004. The landscape has changed, in many different ways, but I would have your two-person owned plumbing company walk in at the same time a regional provider wanting, to bid on the same bid, right? And I found myself early on recognizing that, that larger plumbing company has somebody full-time that's working on their bids, whereas the two-person plumbing company is coming in and it's just those two. They're doing the response to the bids. They're paying the bills. They're doing the plumbing. They're driving the trucks, they're doing the punch list, they're working through their subcontractor agreements with the GCs that they're working with. And I recognized very early on that it took a little bit more time with the smaller supplier to educate, make sure that they had the right information, and presenting it all at the same time always kept it fair and equitable, but also offering to the larger supplier and the smaller supplier, if you still have questions, please let me know, right? So that we can get those questions out to everybody and make sure everybody's on an equal playing field. So I recognized early on that there was great opportunity and power in having a diverse supplier program with a supplier development focus for all suppliers. And I think that as I've grown up in the industry, being able to not just work with suppliers, but work with folks on my teams. I've been I was on JLL's Executive Diversity Council, which helped, me have a platform to interface with NGLCC and NMSCC and WeBank and all of those organizations, as well as smaller outfits, your local, like your chambers, right, of commerce, your business development centers. So I've seen it all from the ground up, and it's really helped me keep in mind, educate, having those upfront discussions about what's the outcome in that engagement and the diverse supplier relationships are beyond, why the programs are important. It's also important to show the growth, to show the development, because I point back to my own story. My life story empowers and inspires somebody else to believe right now that's in poverty that you don't have to remain there. And I'm a living testimony. So as we develop suppliers, they become testimonies to other upcoming and emerging suppliers that they can do it too, right? So it's just a very unique space in the supplier diversity space because very much focused on supplier development.
So you have one of your direct reports comes in and says, I know we have a priority right now on supplier diversity. I can't find, for whatever they're sourcing for, I can't find a supplier that I'm really satisfied with. I could find some suppliers who they meet the diversity requirement, but I'm not confident they meet the quality bar that we have. What's your response back?
What are those qualities that you're struggling with? And do they know that? Because oftentimes we might identify, and it might be any supplier. We identify, we see challenges, we see opportunities, but we don't often have a very candid and open conversation. So the way that supplier may be doing business with another company doesn't require them to show up in those areas. Maybe we have that requirement, right? So they don't know that, right? So that's my first question. Do they know that? Have you identified it? And then do they know that? Have you had an open conversation? If the answer is no, then obviously that's the first step. I'm always a seek first to understand, right? So number two, if the answer is yes, I have, and we're still having a disconnect, well, what's the plan? Because you're working with them, but they're just not providing what you need in these areas. So is there a plan that can be put in place? And are they aware of that? And would they join in on that plan, right? It's all about communication. I think we also make assumptions based on our own experience sometimes that we don't leave space that there could be something else, something new, something challenging. I remember working in the utility space when smart grid technology came about. Nobody knew anything about smart grid technology. I mean, we're talking about AI and all this, and new technology now. I remember those new technologies in the utility space. I never negotiated a contract for anything like that before. And I heard the supplier, by the way. So we were all learning together, right? So I could have easily said, they're not a good fit, but nobody was at the time. And it was a very open conversation between us and suppliers to say, okay, here's where we are, right? And we have to figure this out. We have to work with legal and risk and everybody to figure it all out. That I think that's the first piece, to seek first to understand, rather than not meeting the requirement. I got to find something else, right? So that's my thought. And I do realize sometimes timeline plays a big factor in it, right? Like you got to get some things done too, right? You can only develop and plan for so long before you got to actually have results.
Tell me about Serve Unity Outreach.
Oh, that's my family's nonprofit. We use that sometimes to do outreach for the homeless, snack bags for kids on the weekends. We might get volunteers together to help us do those type of outreaches. It was really close to my heart. I will never forget the charities and outreaches that helped my family growing up, that have helped me even in adulthood at some points in time. So I'm a very community focused and community first person, obviously. So we wanted to be able to give back and do that in the right way. So it's been a really exciting journey with that nonprofit.
That's amazing. I want to finish with this. You were one of seven, correct? You were the oldest of seven. The story you told before about you're getting a call from social services about your siblings. Would you mind sharing how your siblings are doing today? And are you still, my oldest sister will always be, the other mom in the family, no matter how old we get, she'll never stop mothering me. Are you viewed by your siblings as half sister, half mom?
Yes, that's a very interesting dynamic. They've all, for the most part, except for the youngest two, the older ones, every one of them lived with me at some point in time, right? Even as adults. One of my siblings, she quit high school and she decided to move in with us in her early 20s, and we made her go back to high school. It was a condition of staying with us that she had to go back and finish her high school diploma. And it was a really exciting time. It's challenging because she's like, I'm a grown woman now. And I'm like, but you also need a place to stay. So meet you in the middle. You can come stay, but you got to go to school. And by the way, I know a great GED program right up the road that you can enroll in and still work, right? So it was a really great time to see her graduate high school, that she never thought she could do it, and she did it. So, all in all, everybody ends up living your own life. There's some point you have to not be mom and go back to being sister. When I had my own kids, I kind of had to go to be mom to my own kids. But it's so funny because a lot of times we're getting ready to go to Florida in 2 weeks. And a lot of times my sister that's right below me, the one that's right under me, she has 4 kids. And I think her kids think that I'm their grandmother sometimes. So they're used to getting Christmas gifts, and I'm giving to their, one of them's going to Barcelona in Spain for a chorus trip. And she texted me the other day. She's like, would you give to my trip? And I said, absolutely. Right. So there are times where I feel like grandmother when I'm really auntie.
Let me ask you this question. I've heard in the last 6 months, I've heard a topic brought up that I haven't heard before about national service and just this idea of not military, but, and you're such an interesting example, but, this thought of the issue of kids finishing high school and not really having a plan and doing something where, look, if you're not going to go into college, then we've got something that we'll give you choices, but you got to do one of them.
Yeah.
I'm interested in what your viewpoint would be on that.
First of all, I definitely believe that everybody craves having a purpose in life. Everybody inside of you, there's always, there's a voice in everybody that says, I want to have purpose in this world, right? And I think that so often the world, it gives this perception that it's going to dictate what your purpose is if you go through the rhythm of school and our educational system, and you take all these tests that tell personality tests or otherwise, it tells you that you should be X, Y, and Z. Growing up, when I went through school, a lot of those tests and a lot of feedback that I got from teachers said that I should be a teacher or a lawyer, by the way. I remember that.
That doesn't surprise me.
A lot of people say that. It doesn't surprise them. But I am a creative writer. I'm an author. I am a playwright. I'm a community servant. That's like my genuine, like in my heart, if I had all the money in the world, I'd do that every day, right? I say all that to say, growing up, I didn't really have a plan. My birthright was kind of clean slate in a way. It came with its challenges, but, I had to figure out the plan and the path. And the beauty of that is I had the autonomy to do so. It didn't look pretty, but I could figure out what I wanted to be. And I think I got the balance of both worlds. So my take on this, and even with our own sons, is we don't just focus on, the academic or the athletic side or whatever. We're always asking them, who are you? Who do you believe you are? What do you love? What gets you up in the morning? And at the end of the day, sons, I have 3 sons. Yes, you got to understand, you're going to have to pay bills at some point. You're going to have to do all the basics, pay taxes, bills, buy food, clothes. So you've got to have a job. To your point, you can't do nothing, right? But if it's not via college, then what is it? And let's explore. But we try to put the exploration in their hands. And that's just by giving them tools and resources. Hey, did you see they have an apprenticeship program right after high school that you can get into? Hey, do you want to go check it out, by the way? Well, I don't graduate for 2 years. My son that said this the other day, I'll graduate for another, 2 years. And I said, that's okay. But they're having an open house for this apprenticeship. Let's just stop by and see what it's like. We went, and the kid wants to be an engineer.
That's great.
He's an amazing linebacker, football player, one of the top rising freshmen in the state. But he wants to be an engineer, and he has the grades for it. So, but if you had talked to him 5 years ago, he's going to the NFL. That's it. He's not going to college. He's going to the NFL. He's going to college, play college football. He's hoping to get drafted right into the NFL. Like, that was it, So I just think that we need to be reminded of continuing to elevate the options and have those more readily available so that young folks that are coming up can see the options and not just present them, but figure out ways to expose them to it. Because I don't believe one path is the only path, right? For anybody. I think you can do 2 or 3 at the same times at different times in your life too. So.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. The quandary is when you don't have a mom like you or an aunt like you or a sibling like you to say, okay, I know you don't graduate for 2 years, but let's start exploring. And what do you do when those, and that's, I think about that a lot. Because, you don't want to be compulsory, but on the other hand, these kids need some guidance and they got to come somewhere, and you want to give them options, but you want to have something that you say, look, here's some choices. You got to choose one.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that, because if, folks that follow my LinkedIn, you can go look at my LinkedIn. There's probably a post a month about, I need all my professionals on my LinkedIn to figure out a way to give back. I always put that plug in there, because if it wasn't for the teacher that offered me the internship, or my first manager that said, despite you not having a degree, with the home life that you have, by the way, you're 5th on my list. I have one position and you're number 5. Requirement to criteria says I shouldn't even be interviewing you, right? If it wasn't for people like that in the general community taking time out of their day to help me figure out the options, I probably wouldn't have had one, right? So that's where John, people like me and you and others that we know in our professional network, I always say, if you are a professional, especially in the corporate business world, and you're not giving back, I would say an hour a month in some way, shape, or form, there's an opportunity to give back to the youth in our country. It could be an hour a month. There's so many ways now to leverage technology. I was talking to a friend the other day. I helped her get on her volunteering journey. She said, I don't have time, Yolanda. I'm an attorney. I don't have time, Yolanda. And I said, guess what? There is a virtual mentorship program. You can actually go on, log in, and pre-record a video message for your mentee on the days that you can't actually make the session, and they can actually check in and, listen to your video. My point is, it's virtual. You don't even have to drive into the office, right? Or go to the school. Something is better than nothing. Absolutely. Even for that child, to have somebody that has them on their mind, even if it's an hour a month, is better than nothing. And trust me, John, I was that child. And when there was no mom and dad at home, to know that my teacher had me on her mind enough to say that internship for me changed my life, right?
Well, we need so much more of that, especially in the underserved communities in this country, especially from people like you and me, but everybody, because that's what these kids need. They need some guidance. They need someone who will be that difference maker for them in their lives. Listen, we're out of time, but I could talk to you for another 5 hours. I'd love to talk to your siblings at some point. I'd love to get their point of view on how tough you were on them. But anyway.
Oh boy, I gave out a woman or two. I think being the mom's sister, I had the autonomy to do that.
Oh, that's great. This has been such a fun conversation. I really enjoyed having you, and I wish you so much luck. Let's stay in touch.
Yeah, thank you so much, John. Have a great rest of the week.
You too, and to all of our viewers and listeners out there, thanks so much for joining us. This is John Pavia with Smarter Sourcing, and we'll see you on the next episode.